And today we have Diana, who did probably my favorite LinkedIn post of the week yesterday, where she was saying, like a year ago, she was sitting where you are in the audience, learning from the speakers, and today she is now the speaker. And we love a full circle moment. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I will hand it over to Diana.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. Um, as Millie said, a year ago, I was in Dave's session. Actually, I attended a lot of the other ones, but I distinctly remember attending the Notion one. And so when Millie reached out about actually, hosting one, I was like, me? Did you get the right person? And what I loved so much about those sessions, and for love a lot of what Generalist World does, is they're so jam packed and valuable and tangible. If you haven't watched Millie's newsletter, I think it's like get warm, get hot, something in the winter. There was like a newsletter session. That one is gold. There's so much tangible stuff, and it feels like a cheat code that this stuff is free. So I'm just very thrilled and honored to be your host today. I'm going to start sharing my screen. That would probably be helpful. Um, and yeah, I might not see the chat or anything. So if you can't see what I'm presenting, let me know. Alrighty. So just a little bit about me. My background is primarily in media and tech prior. I've worked at companies like Hulu and Viacom and Foursquare in various roles across go-to-market, strategy, operations. I was always primarily supporting Fortune 500, like large enterprise clients. And so with that, I was typically supporting very complicated products, working with and for complicated organizations. And what I found that I had a real knack for was architecting systems and process to kind of organize all that complexity, organize all that chaos, and make it manageable. And for me, as AI kind of started to become more of a thing in the last couple of years, I really view it as a power up to this skill set and to the skill set of so many people. It's an opportunity to power that up. So I really love working with working professionals, businesses to help them identify how AI can supercharge their work. And just two quick fun facts about me. The first website I ever built was a Kobe Bryant fan page. I've been a fan back in the day on GeoCities. Anybody remember GeoCities? RIP GeoCities. So I like to say that I've been building on the internet since 1994, 1997. And over a decade ago, I taught a beginner computer class to senior citizens. And the reason I share these two facts is because I have always believed that technology can and should be fun, personal, and accessible. All right, so this is our agenda for the next 40-ish minutes. We are going to be focusing on agents, but I know there is some confusion between what is the difference between an agent and an automation. So we're going to talk through that quickly. I'm going to walk you through one of my live agents that I have in Notion. Then we're actually going to build an agent together from scratch. And you have the opportunity to either build along with me or just kind of observe and build later. And then we're going to talk through how to identify some good use cases for building agents. We'll wrap with Q&A, although we'll have some active chatter throughout as well. And that's our session. So let's go ahead and dive in. To me, there are two factors that classify whether a workflow is an automation or an agent. It's about the level of judgment and the level of autonomy. In the case of an automation, there's really no judgment or autonomy. It's the same input, same output every single time. So there's no variability. There's no need to learn or adapt or reason. It's just a fixed set of specific rules and actions. So think of it like an assembly line, or like think of it as a more functioning, reliable assembly line. Maybe Lucy's not the best example. But at its core, you can think of an automation as simply an if this, then that statement. If this trigger event happens, then some action happens. So let's look at a quick example. My goal is to stay out of my inbox as much as possible. It is just a rabbit hole of time. I lose so much time if I'm trying to sift through all those emails, trying to figure out like, what do I actually need to do versus what's spam versus what's, noise. It has genuinely become a problem. I was not being productive with that time. It kind of felt like empty calories of time. And it just prevented me from getting things done. I would just kind of be mindlessly, archiving and doing all this stuff that didn't actually progress me getting my to-do list done. So I started with a simple automation, which is If I label a message in my Gmail as action, then a new to-do item in my tasks database in Notion is created. And so let's see what this looks like in action. All right, so if we take this email, my friend Kelly was making an introduction to someone in her network. And you can see here in the animation, I labeled it with action because I wanted to remember that I had to reply, offer the person times to meet, thank Kelly, et cetera, et cetera. And so once I added the label, it's a little hard to see, but you'll see that there's a new item that appeared in my task database Notion. This happened pretty much immediately. And so this is a pretty rote automation. Again, same trigger every time. So when I label an email with action, it's the same input. It's always going to be an email, and it's the same output. It's always going to generate a new to-do in this database. And so this was V1. I later kind of enhanced it a little bit so that it would kind of smartly categorize. So instead of just grabbing the subject line, it would say introduction or, proposal due, invoice follow-up, et cetera, et cetera. But even in that V2 version, it's still just an automation because it's, again, a fixed set of rules. So if we think of automations as process focused, like that assembly line, or even just like a template, it's all about laying out the exact steps and the sequence. And the automation is really just acting as an execution layer. Agents, on the other hand, are outcome focused. So whereas you give an automation set of rules, you're giving an agent a mission, right? Should they choose to accept it. There's still some pre-programming because you have to indicate what the goal is, but you're not outlining the exact steps as before. You're not micromanaging as much. You're telling the agent what to do, but not how to do it. And so because it's not given as explicit instructions, the agent has to then exercise a high amount of judgment and reasoning to figure out what it needs to do in order to accomplish the goal that you gave it. So it's not only executing, but it's thinking and it's planning and it's doing this autonomously. So that's why it's called an agent, because it has agency to make its own decisions independently. And so that brings us to Notion. Notion Agents is fairly new. I've talked to some people who have used Notion and they were surprised to hear that they had agents. It started rolling out, I think, in February of this year. And I was trying to create agents on another platform and I kept running into too much trouble. It just wasn't worth my time to like keep banging my head against the wall. So I figured I'd give Notion a try and I haven't looked back since. This is where all my active agents live and it's where I recommend almost everyone to start because I think it's one of the easiest and user-friendly platforms for this. And I promise I will explain pricing and plans because that is one of the first questions is like, how much is it? But for now, let's just take a look at how this works in real life. So I have a meeting prep agent, and I wish I could tell you that I'm the kind of person who is like cool, calm, collected constantly. I can hop on a call with anyone, anywhere, anytime, just feel 100% comfortable winging that meeting. But that's not me. I like to go into a meeting with the context about the person, the company, and just be clear, even just for myself, what is the purpose of the meeting? What are they hoping to get out of it? What are my goals? What would make this a successful use of everyone's time? And to do this well, it takes time, especially as a solopreneur and someone who's active in a lot of communities. You meet a lot of people. So, the calendar starts to fill up in a good way. I don't want to have to reduce the amount of meetings I'm having because this is too much work. And I certainly don't want to degrade the meeting quality, right? So this is an opportunity for me to kind of try and maintain both. And so I built an agent to help me with this work. And so I'm going to switch screens for a second. And I should say that the other, I try to really operate on a kind of lean, centralized kind of personal OS. So the other tool that I really rely on is Slack. And it works really well with Notion and Notion agents. So what I typically do is for each agent, I have a distinct channel. So most of these channels correspond with a different agent. So this is my meetings channel. So what happens is when a new calendar invite comes in, I get this ping on Slack. And it says, it's telling me who booked it, when they booked it for, what type of call it was. And it's asking me, and this part is the template, right? It's saying like, hey, just so I can prepare the brief properly, can you give me some context on how you know this person, how this came about? Because I realized that that was the context that is always helpful to make each of these, again, more valuable. And so what I do is I reply in that thread to the bot, essentially to the agent bot, and I say, I try to just do, a whisper flow voice dictation, really kind of raw, like, hey, this is how I know this person. And if there's a message, I just copy and paste it. It doesn't have to be pretty. I literally just like copy and paste it from LinkedIn, copy and paste it from Slack, whatever, however they came to me. And so then it says, great, here's the brief ready for your review. And let's see, 11, 12. Yeah, it took 2 minutes to do this. And by no means perfect. It took time to refine this, but this is what it ends up looking like. I have to switch screens again. Alrighty, here we go. All right, so when I click that link, it immediately ports me to this page. So it's creating a page for each of these briefs, and then it's just linking me to that in Slack, right? So that way it's easy to just click into it. And so based on what I told it that I want, I want the context because oftentimes I have, 3 calls in a week and I don't remember who I met from Generalist World or AI Snack Club or, what have you, Society of Working Moms. Quick profile, just kind of basic general web research about the person, what their background and experience is, and then a stab at what alignment might look like for a partnership, or if this is a prospect, how I might be able to help them as a client. Gives me some kind of thought starters for discovery questions. I don't often use them as kind of as is, but they are a great starting point to say, okay, yeah, but I actually want to learn about this instead. And then I'll kind of override this and customize the questions. And then just some other research findings. So that's what that looks like. And actually, I won't go too deep into it, but just so you can see. And we'll kind of dive into this in a second, but I can always see at any time, what were the original instructions, what is it connected to, how many times it's run, and then I can chat with it to edit it at any point. So that's that. Let me switch again. All right. Actually, I'm going to stop because I lost my presentation. Sorry about that. Alrighty, let's try this again. All right. Okay, great. All right. So now we're going to try to build. In the interest of time, we're not going to build that agent that we just looked at right now because I do feel like it takes a bit of time to really refine that to personal preferences and format, and sometimes the connections can be wonky. But what I thought would be a good starting point for everyone is a morning brief agent. I think most of us wouldn't mind some extra help getting our day started. What's on my plate today? What are my meetings? What commitments do I have? Did any emails come in last night that needs my attention right away? So before we get to building, a couple of things to note, because again, I do get these questions about, okay, but what is the structure? How does this work? So, and it's changed. So as of last month, they've updated the pricing structure for agents. So today, as it is currently, you need to have a Notion business account. And so that's either $24 a month or $20 a month if you buy the annual plan to access the agent feature. They do have a 2-week trial. So I would recommend even just signing up right now while we're on this call if you want to try building live, but you can always do that later. The business plan comes with 300 credits. And then if you want more, you can buy additional credits in batches of 1,000 for $10. And I'll get into kind of what these credits really mean and what it kind of gives you in a second, but that's kind of the lay of the land there. And so, all right, here's our prompt. And don't worry, I know this is like a wall of text, but we're gonna break it down into components right now. All right. So you are a morning brief agent. Your job is to create a daily briefing that helps me decide what to do in 5 minutes. So what we're doing here is we are assigning the agent a role. We're giving it a name. We're defining what it is we want the agent to actually produce. What's the output? In this case, it's a daily briefing. And then we're making sure the agent understands how this actually ties into a larger goal. What does this actually help us do, right? There's the tactic, and then there's kind of the strategy, the broader goal. And so we can also give it a context layer, right? So usually what this means is telling Notion what tools and what data that it should be referencing in order to produce the output. And then this is not a need to have, but sometimes I like to include fallback directions if I can already anticipate where there might be gaps. Most of the time, it will be kind of thinking through the assumption of if it can't connect to a certain tool or connect to certain data, what would I want it to do in that scenario? Most of the time, I want it to just, as a human would do, kind of make your best guess, right? And then, but tell me what's missing or how you made that inference, and then we can work to refine that later. And so you'll always have the opportunity to edit the instructions at any time. So I wouldn't worry too much about kind of getting it right on the first try. And you will be making constant kind of tiny refinements, especially in the first few days of when you're building this. So again, don't worry too much about having to fit everything, but just to kind of walk you through why I kind of built it out this way. And so here I'm telling the agent how I want the information. What's the format? Is it a bulleted list? Is it a short summary? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it a new Notion page? Is it a Slack notification? And what's the tone? In this case, because it's an agent that's helping me orient and prioritize my day, I really want it to use the lens of how can I move items forward? What's actionable? What can I get off my plate today? And it's also important to me because we know that sometimes LLMs can be sycophantic. I want to inject some sort of instruction to make sure it's challenging or raising issues using its judgment. It's not really helpful for me to just have it regurgitate my schedule and show me my list of meetings. I want it to actually proactively flag where there are conflicts, where the load for the day maybe seems too ambitious, like a real, EA assistant would. All right, so I'm going to put the prompt in the chat, and then there's going to be a section that says like customize this part. And then I'm going to switch and start kind of building that out. So let me just first find the chat. Here we go. And I don't know if there's a way to pin that in case people are just joining. Okay, so now let's build. Okay, so I'm going to, this is a blank workspace, and this is not connected to where my agent's already running. That way I can show you how all the connectors work, and we're going to go through each step. So this is where we land. There are a bunch of different ways to get to agents, and honestly, they're finding more and more ways to surface it because it's kind of their new shiny toy. So you can come here to new agent. You can come up here to the chat bar. I'm going to go there. And then I'm going to click Notion AI. The reason why it's separated, not to get too into it, but there are a lot of other things you can do with Notion AI. For example, I basically set up my entire kind of work OS system using Notion AI. I said, hey, I need a CRM. These are the fields that I want. Can you wire it up? And then it scaffolded the whole thing. And then I verbally dictated, great, can you create contacts for these people? And I just voice dictated like the 20 most important contacts I wanted to track. And then I kind of just built from there. So this would be kind of more an all-purpose AI chat, but you can also just go to this agent. But let's just go in here. And so, all right, so I'm going to paste in that prompt. And I'm going to keep it because I already formatted it how I like. And I'm just going to go ahead and press and click submit. And so it's going to think for a little bit. It's going to do a little dance. It's going to ponder, it's going to list connections. So this is again the agent working. It's thinking through, it's planning. Okay, what is the best way to set it up? I gave it some direction of, hey, I want these tools, this access. This is kind of how I want you to output, but I'm not saying like first measure a cup of flour, right? Like it knows where I'm trying to go, and now it's thinking through how to get there. And you can see it lists out the steps. So, it's loading the tools, it's listing the connections, it's thinking things through. Okay, great. So it's asking me if I want to connect to Notion Mail. I'm going to say later, AKA no, thank you, because I want to connect it to Gmail because that's the actual. I'm not ready to migrate everything to Notion. I love Notion, but my email stays in Gmail. I've had that Gmail account for a long time. Um, okay, so it doesn't look like it looks like it stopped. So I'm just gonna say, and I used Whisper Flow. I think I might have mentioned that tool already, but it's a voice dictation that app that works across your computer. I think it's also available on mobile. So I just press the function button on my keyboard and then I speak into existence. Um, are you still working on wiring up this agent? Because it's like, I don't see a loading screen. What are you doing? This is me being nice. Sometimes I get snippy with them. I'll admit it. Not yet. I tried to wire it up, but the connection steps were blocked. Okay, so maybe I need to be more explicit because I did say Gmail, so that's fine. I don't want to use Notion Calendar or Notion Mail. I want to connect to Google Calendar and Gmail. This demo's going so well already. This is the best part of doing live demos. If for some reason doing it in a blank workspace is causing trouble, we can switch to mine. It won't show you these connection points. All right, let's try it. Okay, so it will basically guide you step by step connecting. So let's see. So it says, hey, you need to install this app in your workspace. Yes, it's already installed because I've done this before. Confirm connection. So these are just I think of it as like, plugins and just kind of making those connections. Oh, only one workspace can be connected to Gmail. Please disconnect the existing connection. Okay, so let's switch here then. Um, let's just do it again here. And it'll look a little faster because these tools are already wired up, but for the purpose of time, and we can just use the time for questions, let's just switch over. So my apologies on that. That's usually fairly simple. It's kind of like a couple of clicks. It'll say, hey, connect this, connect this. You say yes, yes, yes. Take all my data, take my firstborn child, all that stuff. Just the usual tech data agreements. Joking, I'm joking. All right, so it's thinking through still. While it's doing that, let me just show you the one that's already set up, and then we can kind of go back and see how we got there. But this is where all my agents live. Oops. And so this is my morning brief. And these are the settings. So, very big. So a couple things. The trigger, like we talked about, similar to automation. So I want it to run every weekday at 7 a.m. You can also, in this case, manually trigger it to say, hey, morning brief, and just ask it for an update or something like that. So you have the option of both a schedule and also a manual trigger. What are the instructions? I want you to research. This is what we talked about. Look at my calendar, look at my tasks, my mail, also look at Slack. And then I want you to create a page. This is the format. And then these are the sections that I want. I want you to say, what are my priorities today? Pick three, or the top three things I need to focus on today. What are other tasks that are due that are not necessarily maybe in that top three? And then other like kind of dealer's choice. What are other things you think I should be working on based on what you know about my life, I guess, my workspace and all these tools that I've connected to. And then maybe there are things that I missed. I also have, once you start building, the cool thing is that you can start connecting and really layering. So I have a separate agent that is a podcast digest. I love a podcast. I love a newsletter. The problem with that is that I have an inbox full of newsletters and a podcast app that just has like 50 badges of like new episodes. So what I decided is I need an agent to help me sift through all the new episodes and highlight what is worth watching, specifically as it relates to AI for my job. Later, I will maybe do a personal one, but there's so much, AI content out there, and I have a very particular lens of which I think is important or relevant, which is things that are practical for my audience. I don't necessarily need to listen to every podcast about every single model release. What I need to keep up on is how is this going to impact small businesses? How is this going to impact individuals? Um, kind of W-2 workers, knowledge workers. And so I gave it that filter. And so as part of this morning brief agent, it says, oh, hey, by the way, there was a new podcast episode from How I AI with Clairvaux that I think would be really interesting for your audience. So you should listen to that one. Eventually, I will build the newsletter one and then tie it into here. So that's the other thing that's great about this is that they can kind of build and layer on to one another. I always love a TLDR. So and actually I can maybe show you here since it's being a little wonky. So this is an example. Let's see. Yeah. All right. Let's look at something from last week. I need to cancel a subscription. I need to send a newsletter. I have 3 meetings today and an event. And then, so again, a TLDR because I don't want like a big wall of text in my Slack. And then similar to the meetings one, I click through and it goes to a page that has more details if and when I want those. So, and it's those same sections that we just saw, right? Today's priorities, 3 things only, other things that are going on today. And then it's saying like, hey, by the way, you got this email that you haven't read yet. You might want to reply to that. Nothing that I missed yesterday. Amazing. All right, let's see where we are here. Okay, so this was us trying to create this morning brief from scratch essentially. Okay, so what it's doing is it's actually running this right now. So instead of telling me, I think this might be because it's already connected, but let's see. What if I say, I'm just going to tell it exactly what's happening. I'm doing a demo. Pretend I don't have a morning brief agent and show me what the process would look like to build it. But if anyone is following along on their own, you should see basically prompts walking you through. Here we go. So it would be something like this, and it would ask you questions like, here, which calendar, if you have multiple calendars, which one do you want to be the authoritative calendar? You can only pick one calendar. Which one is that going to be? You need to pick a database for what your to-dos are. Do you have them in different places? The other thing a little phrase I like to use anytime I'm prompting is, I always put it at the end, is ask me questions until you're 95% confident about how to proceed. It will most of the time kind of proactively ask you clarifying questions, but I find that doing that and just adding that at the end tends to kind of expedite that clarity process. And it tends to be better to kind of try to clarify as much as possible upfront, from like a token efficiency perspective, so that you don't keep going back and forth. But if you just, again, think of natural conversation. If you're explaining something to someone, setting up a project, usually more context is better. So it's going to go through each of those sections, like the data, the tools, et cetera, and like ask you clarifying questions. It might ask you again to define, exactly the output, like how do you want this, et cetera, et cetera. And then it will do an initial wire up of the agent, which again will look something like this. I wonder if I could find like the first one I did here. It's been running for a long time, so it might not. But anyways, it'll basically show you this screen, the settings. And this is where it has created its own instructions based on kind of the conversational prompt you gave it. And then it's going to list out all the tools that are connected. So web access is turned on because I want that general web research for, that's more for the meeting brief. I think this one is just on just as a catch-all. Notion, these are the other kind of pages that I wanted to reference. Slack, This is the specific channel that I wanted to post to. This is the authoritative calendar that I've chosen. I do literally have like 5 calendars, which is a separate problem that we won't discuss here. But this is the one that I've decided is important. So that's the one that's connected. This is the email, same thing, too many emails, too many calendars, that I've decided is connected. And then you can always, again, add connections. There's so many connectors here. So it really just depends on your line of work. But you can connect, Cursor, if you're vibe coding, see other CRMs, et cetera, et cetera. You can select the model. If you don't select the model, it will default usually to Sonnet 4.6, which is a Claude model, which I prefer because I prefer Claude, but you can always change this, and we'll talk a little bit about how that impacts credits, et cetera. And then you can always chat with it. So let's see, let's pretend, let's see, I'm trying to see if I can find it. It's not working right now because candidly, I am over my credits. It's literally gonna restart tomorrow, but there is this text box is usually editable. And so you would just say, and actually let me switch back and continue the presentation because this will make more sense in a second. Thanks for bearing with me. I know it's a lot of switching screens. Oops. Oh, no. All right, let's try that one more time. Okay, great. No, no, things are getting out of control. My apologies, everyone. Let's try this again.
This is how you know it's live and not an AI, people. There you go. We're just proving that we're not robots.
And I should say, I do always actually say that about automations agents, and that's actually what I want to get into in a second here, which is that, so let's actually just jump. So first I want to just, this is kind of like a little cheat sheet for later if you're building this or building a different agent. You can kind of just use this as a little guide. If you only use the top line, that's honestly enough to start. Just keep it really simple. You are a blank agent. Your job is to blank. This helps me blank. It will walk you through the rest, but it is totally fine to start with that as a prompt. Again, if you have extra time to refine that a little bit, it helps, but not necessary. But so easy build, which pretend it was easily built. Some connection issues, but I will say that it's not always easy to maintain. So just like tires need to be checked for air pressure, you need to fill it up, you need to get them rotated. You will need to do that from time to time with agents. So they need to be calibrated, because what can often happen is context drift. So the model starts to cast a much broad. So even though you give it kind of parameters, it will start to cast a broader net and be beyond what you told it to do. It will over index on patterns and say, oh, well, I just assumed because XYZ, then I'm just going to, it'll kind of, that's, the double-edged sword of having judgment. It's then going to start making decisions. And so you really have to be that quality bar. That's why human in the loop is very important. So sometimes quality will start to go down. So in the podcast example, for instance, I noticed that it was great to start. And then maybe a few weeks in, I noticed that it was pinging me like every day with an episode. And I said, that's odd because I don't think every single day there's something that's relevant, specific to the style and the audience that I'm looking for, which is again, like keeping it practical, not this like AI trending industry news and all this kind of like super duper macro stuff, which is can be interesting, but not like super relevant. And so basically I worked with it and said, like, I think you're over recommending things. Like I gave you a very specific, here's what you recommended. Here are the specific reasons why this is not relevant for me. This one was okay for this reason. These were not. And so I had to continue to refine that. And so the moral of all of that is that it's not, infallible, right? So that's a good thing. It reminds us that we are very necessary as part of this process. But I do want to cite that because I think that sometimes, on social media, it's like build an agent and then like you're done. It's like, No, you need to maintain that and really keep an eye on if it's performing the way that you want. I would also say, kind of as part of that, I think there's also sometimes a temptation to build this fully autonomous agent with like complex architecture. And, you see those LinkedIn posts where it's like, I killed my whole sales team and, all this stuff. And it's like, I mean, first, it's like very violent. That sounds awful. Um, but also, I think it gives folks, it's overwhelming and it makes people think that they have to start big. I've done these workshops. I've worked with a lot of people on this. I've, taught a lot of professionals. The most success is when people take an incremental approach. Start small. Pick one thing, as simple as you can pick. Test, observe, refine. Like let it sit, let it breathe. Don't touch it for a few days. Don't touch it for a few weeks if you can. And it's going to sound weird, but like wait for the friction. Like you kind of have to be, I feel like as a society, like the convenience has just gotten to this level where the moment something feels inconvenient, like, no, forget it. But you kind of have to what I found is like you have to find that friction point so you know what you're actually solving for. So much of what I hear when I do these workshops is like, everyone's talking about this new tool. Like, should I learn it? I'm like, well, forget the tool for a second. Like, what are you trying to do? What is the problem you're trying to solve? Or sometimes they're even using AI already and they're saying, well, I'm using this, but everyone keeps talking about this. And I say, is the thing that you're using still working? Is it broken? Because if it's not broken, like there's no point in chasing these tools. So that's why AI Made Simpler is kind of my brand because I really emphasize that as much as possible. And there are also practical reasons for that. Because as you make things more complex, you add more steps, you have it access more tools, it will also get more expensive. From like a maintenance standpoint, as I just talked about with the context strip, but actual credits. Um, and so try not to overbuild or over engineer. It is a recipe for frustration. And then you kind of give up and just do things the manual way, which is like the thing we were trying to move away from, right? And I don't want that for you. I want everyone to feel the magic. Okay. But kind of going more into the credit system and how it works on Notion. So again, you get 300 credits with the business plan, then you can buy additional credits. And the way that like the credit usage is determined is mostly around three factors, which is, what is the volume of context that the agent has to read? Does it need to look at your, in the case of the morning brief, it has to look at calendar and tasks and email and things like that. How many steps are involved? It has to scan and then has to synthesize and has to write a summary, then it has to post in Slack and create a page, right? Those are all different steps. What's the cadence? A simple agent that runs every hour could actually use more credits than a very complex agent that only runs once a quarter or once a month, right? And Notion actually has some really good documentation about benchmarking and things like that. And I will include that in the deck that you'll receive. But just to give you an idea, this is my dashboard. Um, so this specific slice is how many credits were used and how many runs were completed in the last 30 days. And so a completed run is it runs through the whole cycle and it basically gets to that output successfully. Um, you can see my morning brief was by far the biggest credit culprit. Again, makes sense because it's searching my email, my calendar, multiple databases in Notion. It's sending me a Slack notification and it's creating a Notion page as a reference file. I ran it every day, and a couple days I had to rerun it because of that context drift. So you'll see that it was run 32 times. Again, calibration. On the other end, the meeting brief agent completed more than twice the amount of runs and used 5 credits. So it's way more efficient because it's much simpler. The inputs are not as dynamic. It's usually just doing a general web search, and then it's just using basic reasoning to fill out that template of discovery questions, etc. And so
Hey,
as you
Diane,
saw, yeah.
sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure, are we meant to see your slides right now?
Oh gosh, you sure are. Have I just been talking to myself?
It
Well,
it's
that's
just been the last
embarrassing.
like minute or two. Yes, that's fine.
Incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, here we go. So morning brief, big credit hog. Take them all. Ran it 32 times. Morning brief agent, it ran a bunch more, but used way less credits. And so as I was saying, you saw I'm out of credits. It will restart at midnight. Yay. But clearly I need to prune. I need to decide what is actually driving value. Um, these three here, they're using a decent amount of credits, especially if I combine them all. And I already know off the top of my head, like I would not notice if they were gone. Frankly, like I've seen the Slack notifications on those channels and I haven't opened them. So clearly I don't need them. And so those credits can now be allocated to a different agent, maybe my newsletter agent, or can just be additional credits if I want to make my morning brief even more complicated, et cetera. Or just, I don't need to max them out. I can just also just not have them all being used. All right, so I'm going to speed up a little bit on this end just to make sure we have time for questions, but just wanted to kind of leave y'all with some resources because again, I've done this quite a bit, and what I also hear people struggle with is like, what do I build? Like, this is amazing. Like, where do I start? There's this analysis paralysis, which I totally can empathize with. Um, but it's like, this all sounds amazing. That means everything could be amazing. Where should I start to build amazing, right? I usually suggest a framework like this, just either doing this in like a Figma or Miro or just using physical like notepads, post-its, whatever. Think through what tasks are repetitive, tasks that are time consuming, tasks that are mentally draining, and you just drag your feet to them. They could take five, like most of the things I dread most take 5 minutes, and it just takes me like 2 months to do them. Like anything involving like insurance, health, dentist, like you name it. It's like, oh wow, why did I wait 2 months to do that? Those are totally, I mean, not those exact examples, but those types of tasks are totally worth trying to attack, right? Because they're quick. You just have to have someone help you do it. Or high impact. So for me, meeting prep, for instance, is high impact. That's something that impacts how I show up in meetings, the quality of those meetings, my pipeline, a lot of other things. So for me, that's a big investment to make sure that agent is correct, and it saves me a ton of time. So using something like this, I think is helpful to think through what might be useful for you. They also have an agent marketplace. So Notion has a bunch of like kind of plug and play agents that have already configured the instructions. You can use it out of the box and then just kind of customize it. So that's also an easy gateway. These are just some examples of the more popular ones. So if you don't know where to start, you can start with one of these. And in terms of kind of a actual action plan, I would say pick one idea either from something I've mentioned or, something that's relevant to you, and try to do this exercise first though before you actually configure it. Like think about what are you actually solving for, and try to get very detailed. So I lose 20 minutes every time I have to prepare a meeting brief for this meeting. And also sometimes I forget, so I'm scrambling, and it's not putting me in the right state that I want to be for these meetings, whatever it is, right? Again, it can be quantifiable, and sometimes it might be qualitative. And then also think about, what would success look like? I would consider this agent successful or helpful if it blank. If I only, if it gave me, strong first drafts that I only had to do extra research on for 5 minutes, or it got so good, I didn't even have to do any research. I could just hop on, read the brief 10 minutes before, and feel really prepared. Whatever that looks like for you, um, try to think that through. And then go ahead and build it. Use that little cheat sheet we have, and then again, really observe. Did you get that time back? Did it relieve that mental load in the way that you were hoping for? Can you measure that? And then just give yourself a big pat on the back. You just built your first agent. And the next thing is just to tell me about it, because I love hearing about. It's the best part of these workshops is what happens after, and like people creating their own magic. And so please do that. And with that, I hope you all got the agent theme, by the way, throughout the images with alias. Because if not, it would make me sad, but that's okay. It can just be for me. That's fine.
We got it. Look
Um,
at all those claps. We got it. We got you.
thanks for validating my presentation visuals.
These things matter. We do have some questions if you're up for it.
Let's go.
Let's go. The first one I'm going to group into Claude slash other tools. And the big question is
Mhm.
people are like, at what point do I use Claude? At what point do I
Mm,
use Notion? How do you think about what makes sense?
yep. So, couple, I wouldn't say caveats, but just considerations. I get that question a lot, especially for Claude Cowork, because it's kind of this in between of, it has the ability to help you do things like building agents and automations. Your machine has to be on and active. So I don't know if you've seen those LinkedIn posts where like someone's like at an airport and their screen is open just enough so that this like the computer doesn't fall asleep and they're just like walking through the airport because they have something running. So there is a tether to your machine being active and on. And so sometimes when I see those posts, it's like, I built this agent and I did this and this while I slept. I'm like, okay, so you just had your computer on the whole night running this. Notion just runs in the background. So I would say for most things, I'm using Notion because I don't want to have to worry about like, oh gosh, I have a meeting tomorrow. I got to make sure my computer is on so that Claude Cowork runs that meeting brief prep, right? So I would say, again, start with what you're solving for. The other thing is that, you know, I'm talking about Notion because I love it and I use it, but start like, start with where you are. Start with what you know. Again, if you're already comfortable with Claude, if you're already comfortable with um, XYZ tool, chances are they have an AI feature or they're working on one. And they're all kind of starting to blend and do similar things. So I would say explore if there's a tool that you're happy with, just see like if, you know, I use, if you're a Google user, like maybe Gemini is easier because it's just already embedded, whatever it is. So it really depends on the task, but I'd say for agents specifically and things that run on a schedule, I prefer to use Notion specifically for agents. And then I do have some legacy automations in Zapier. Because the other thing I will say is companies like Zapier, they're purpose built. Like that has been their lane for a long time. So they do this and they do this really well. Other tools, again, are trying to be kind of good at everything. So that's not to say they're bad, but for example, there isn't like an interface where you can see very simply here are all the agents. Here's when they ran. Here's the credit usage for this specific agent. Notion has that. Zapier has things like that. Claude, Cowork, anything in Claude, Claude Chat, even Claude Code, there isn't going to be that very clean, tidy UX UI because it's meant to do a bunch of things. Again, not a
Mm.
bad thing, but for me, I tend to kind of, I'm a generalist. I love generalists, but sometimes for tools, you kind of want a specialist, right? Zapier, this is what it's its bread and butter, right? So again, think about what you're trying to solve for, explore what you know. But yeah, kind of keep that in mind. And then also tokens, right? So again, can you get away like for me, $20 a month for Notion and everything encompassing is great. And I will get all those agents to fit under 300 credits.
Mm.
And that's a cap, right? That's a fixed cost that I can predict every month. With Claude and especially with Cowork, anecdotally, it seems like there's some token inefficiency. I think because it is, I mean, Claude is already prone to over engineer and over complicate compared to other tools, which is ironic because it's the one that I like, but I know its tendency, so I just correct for that. But because of that, when you give it a task in Cowork, the times I've tried it, it's like it's very elaborate, and suddenly it's like, oh, my tokens are gone. Now they're
Mm.
doubling Cowork usage for the next month, but like think about why, because then you're gonna get hooked on it, and then they're just gonna be like, okay, cool, we're gonna like make you somehow do all the work you were doing last month without that extra usage. So I would just be cognizant of that and not try to take away from other tools, but just like really start to examine that. And so with the agent, I think a good, if you're building a Notion, what's great again is you can get so specific. You can build an agent and then see how many credits did that use. And then again, like, was it helpful for me? How helpful was it? And then you can kind of really tweak and kind of tinker to maximize those tokens. It's just a little harder to do that in other tools because it's not as, again, purpose built for that. I hope that
Mm.
answered the question.
Makes total sense. This is kind of a fun question. I'm not sure if you know, but let's see. I'm interested to know how much we can charge people to build automations like this and for monthly
Mm.
maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, as with anything, just depends on the complexity, the tools, how many things are connected, right? Because again, there can be very simple automations that are very helpful for a business, right? So let's say, I'm speaking with a real estate brokerage later today. Those are great use cases because they can actually be quite simple. It's like email sequencing, things like that. Um, is it an enterprise client? Sometimes those are connecting to multiple databases, right? So I think there's a level of
Mm.
complexity that would really change that rate. But yeah, absolutely. To answer the question, yes, that is a job. That's a service that people are charging. How much that would be really depends on, I'd say, the client, the type of automation, and then yeah, you'd have to just figure out kind of a maintenance, maybe add-on package or something like that.
Makes total sense. A quick question is, do you know if you can connect to Outlook or iCloud as well as Gmail?
Yes.
Great. Is the
I'd say
open?
I'd say that most tools that most folks are using is connected to Notion, Zapier,
Mhm.
and Claude, honestly, right? Again, those other tools, they want to be connected because they want people to ultimately use their services. So uh, there's a few like edge cases. Like I had someone ask me about Evernote, which used to be like, I
Mm.
was like diehard Evernote from like 2008 to like 2014. I have just dozens and dozens of notes that just buried in an Evernote that I will never see again because they give me too much pop-up ads. And she was asking like, "Hey, I want to migrate to Notion, but like, how do I do that? I have like 10 years worth of Evernote." And I said, MCP, Model Context Protocol. It's basically just a connector, and it doesn't exist today, but it's coming. So again,
Mm.
if your favorite tool doesn't have AI today, chances are they're working on it right now.
Yeah. Are you able to collaborate or share your Notion agents with other team members, or is it specific to you?
Yeah, so that might be a different plan. I think you'd have to be on like an enterprise plan, but yeah, you can certainly share agents. And then if you can act as like an administrator. So let's say, or you're an agency, you have subcontractors, maybe you have folks helping you. You can kind of have role-based permissions where you can see like, oh, okay, Millie's agents are really efficient. Diana's agents are really inefficient and expensive. So it'll give you that level of granularity at the member level as well as at the agent level, but it just might be a different plan. So the pricing I quoted might be different.
Makes total sense. The last question we'll have time for, I think, and I know we didn't get to everyone's. I do apologize. We will link Diana's LinkedIn so you can also just send anything directly. Is around confidentiality and NDA obligations. Do you have any best practices for managing data access when you're integrating Notion agents?
Is that more for like personal data privacy or more like if you're working with a client? Because I've gotten both questions before. I've gotten questions from like
Hmm.
consultants who are trying to understand like what are my obligations or kind of what's the best practice
I
versus
would
like
assume it's for clients rather than personal.
yeah, so most of the time for clients, you're using their enterprise tools and access. And so, like for example, I'm working with an enterprise client right now. I do all of my work, all my like Claude work for them. That's obviously related to their work in their enterprise instance. So I'm on,
Mm.
they've given me an at enterprise.com email, and I use that to sign up for Claude, and then it gives me access to their plan.
Mm.
And on enterprise plans for Claude, there's already kind of a built-in clause and data about like not training and all of that stuff. And they have other, as you can imagine, enterprise guardrails and safety and SOC 2 and compliance and all that stuff. And then I've also worked with a client in Notion. And so she has her own workspace that she permissions access to for different specific pages. So she
Makes
has a
sense.
lot of stuff in there. And so even if she has, her calendar, email, whatever, I can only see certain pages where we
Mm.
collaborate together. So you can basically partition and permission most of these things so that you as a consultant can kind of work within your clients' instances, and then they're already kind of they've kind of already dealt with the privacy themselves. And I do have, if the person was actually asking for more of the kind of personal data privacy, I have a privacy guide that I put together that literally guides you
Mm.
step by step to make sure for each major tool, like where to go to make sure your data training is off.
Ooh,
Because it's, how
okay.
it is. They kind of hide that sometimes. They move it around a little bit. So just a good kind of hygiene exercise. It will probably only take you like 30 minutes depending on how many tools you want to do this for. But yeah, definitely, privacy is always going to be a big question as we continue in
Yeah.
this era.
That would be great. We will add that into the post-event email. So everyone, Edra and I will send that out tomorrow. And thank you so much, Diana. This has been fantastic. As always, we are going to connect with someone on this call by clicking on the LinkedIn post that Edja would have shared. You can go and leave a question, you can leave a takeaway, you can just say hey, and then go and have a little snoop through the comments and find someone who looks interesting, who you might have a question or a connection with, and just say hi. And this is the whole idea of summer school. We learn together and then we keep going and connecting beyond the classroom. Thank you so much, everybody. We have two more sessions tomorrow. They are our lovable sessions. So I hope to see many of you there. Have a great
Thanks,
day,
everyone.
evening, morning. Bye.